Hi, everybody. I'm Al Bernstein. Welcome to another edition of our Big Time Boxing Show. And on this one, as we often do, I get a chance to visit with one of the many, many fine writers who are covering the world of boxing on top websites in the digital world where most of the really good journalism in boxing is happening. And he's a perfect example of it. He writes for Boxing Scene and does an excellent job of covering the sport and chronicling everything that goes on in it, and often adding some great insights along the way. Let me welcome Lucas Kettelle into the fray. Lucas, how are you?
Doing really good, and I have to say it's an honor to be able to chat with you. So it's very humbling, and it makes me feel like I've done something with my life.
Well, I'm pretty sure this is not the only validation you get or will get as you continue with your life. But it's a delight to have you here, and you do a great job covering the sport. Um, let's talk a little bit about this past weekend in boxing, which you've written about. One is the fight that I participated in Detroit this weekend. Our main event of Kay Scott against Olivia Curry for the middleweight championships, WBC and WBA variety. And they did what they did the first time they fought. When they fought to a draw, they produced a very competitive and fun fight in which Kay Scott got the decision this time, which he probably deserved the first time. What were your thoughts on that fight?
Well, I have many, which I feel like boxing writers always have many thoughts. But one thought was no, because when the scorecard
Yeah,
read and they said majority
right.
decision or whatever, I don't know
Yeah.
how you look at that fight and say that was a 95-95 fight.
Mm,
I feel as though Kay Scott did enough to separate. It was hard for me to find rounds for Olivia Curry to give her rounds. I also feel like
yeah.
after such a brutal fight and the style Curry has where she gets hit a bit, it seems like maybe she's slowing down or it was hard to take two consecutive really hard fights. That was an observation I started to think in the second half of the fight. For Scott, I think she kind of did more of the same. I think the one thing I noticed was the first fight was a fight of the year type fight. Scott did more separating in this fight. It wasn't always pretty. In that second half, she was mauling, pushing, but I felt like this was a definitive victory, albeit I think most people thought that she won the first fight definitively. I really felt like there was no doubt about the outcome after this fight.
I agree with you. And it was a strange deja vu because the first card, 98-92, was the exact same score as the last time when the first card was read. And then 95-95 was the second card that was read. The difference, and so I saw the look on Kay Scott's face was what you said, oh no, not again. And then the third card was 97-93. Mike Fitzgerald, who put the card in for Curry, is a Midwest judge who apparently had some regional bias or something going on because, like his two Midwestern compatriots in the first fight, apparently didn't pay attention to the fight. In any case, Kay Scott got the victory. And you make a couple good observations. Kay Scott is fascinating because a legendary amateur career, is 41 years of age, turned pro very late, and uh, in her last two fights has completely altered her personality as a fighter. Once a pure boxer, maybe not even a boxer puncher, you just call her a boxer, um, has really embraced being more of an aggressor.
Yeah, I think that it's like, is her identity, and I'm gonna throw it back to you, right? Is her identity changing, or maybe is it like just when you're 41, you can't be that avoidant fighter, you can't use your legs as much?
Possible.
Or is it like an evolution? I think that like maybe all right, I always go to the poetics in fights. Like I always try to make it something more, and sometimes genius is the obvious. Maybe this is who she is because she's getting older and it's the most useful style. But I do think that Olivia Curry in the first fight was kind of going, "Why aren't you running around more?" Like so there is something changing about her.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Well, in any case, it was a very entertaining fight, and Kay Scott gets the middleweight championship, and she'll have some attractive fights waiting for her. Um, this past weekend, that same weekend as the Curry Scott fight. Of course, all eyes were trained on the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua extravaganza, which was by all standards, and you wrote much about this leading up to it and tried very, very hard with different people that you talked to kind of frame this in a way that we could all get a handle on it. And that's a pretty tall task. I was one of the people you talked to for your story about it. Did the event in any way, whatever your expectations were, and I think you're probably like me and everyone else, you weren't quite sure what to expect. How did it lay out in terms of your expectations of the event?
I mean, it was weird, and that was my
Yeah.
expectation. So it was weird. It's you like I think you framed it the best for me when I talked to you that it was absurd in nature that he'd fight a lightweight and then his next fight would be against a heavyweight. Like that alone is just a strange position. Um it's something that I guess the thing that I'm going to say, and it might not even answer your question, but this is what I'm grappling with is this what
Mhm.
boxing is going to start to look like in the next 5 years? Like,
Yeah,
where does
good
this
question.
fit with world
Right,
championship boxing? So
right.
the event itself it's weird, but I guess what I grapple with in the aftermath is not the outcome, it's not the result, is how many of these big events that we get for boxing is this type of fight, and how many are the Virgil Ortiz Boots Ennis or the Joshua
Yeah.
Pagan looking to win a title fight. What does the landscape look over the next few years?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and, I've always kind of taken the viewpoint that these crossover fights were one-offs, but what's changing about them is that current boxers now seem to be a part of them, as in the case of Joshua, and it would have been Gervonta Davis, and now the Jake Paul experiment may be over based on what happened in the ring. I don't know, but he took, it was quite I mean, got his jaw broken in a couple of spots, and it may or may not end his boxing career. But you're right. We don't know what other detour the boxing world can take in this regard. I mean, there's apparently plans for a Floyd Mayweather Mike Tyson fight coming up, so that's kind of in the same vein, and we do wonder about that. So it's intriguing. Um, the uh, the the card itself had promise, but didn't quite live up in the undercard. It wasn't as scintillating as we might have expected. Alicia Baumgartner carved out a very impressive victory, and that one was fought with 12 rounds of 3-minute rounds, and uh, some people are are questioning that based on that fight. But I'm curious to get your opinion. My thinking is that that fight was probably going to be a tactical fight, no matter how many minutes it was fought.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that Layla wasn't as familiar to the US audience because she had fought a
Right.
lot on Eye of the Tiger on Canada. She came
Yeah.
off a big knockout win. She's redeveloped herself. She came with a deep hunger and desire to win. And I saw all fight week she had a confidence. And I think that you can't discount
Hmm.
when fighters are really coming to win. And it might sound
Yeah.
hokey, but especially like when you call a fight, I'm sure you kind of get a feeling this guy's really here to win. And you get a sense that they're not just
Sure.
there. And Bumgarner
Yeah.
was fighting someone with a deep desire to change their life. And I feel like
Yeah.
those fights are going to turn into tactical battles because you're fighting not just the skill, but the will of a fighter who won't go away. So I thought she did fine. I think the thing I grapple with Bumgardner is she's kind of found herself in a celebrity status amongst social media people. And it's like, how do you balance being a celebrity that's known for kind of your good looks and your outside with being a championship boxer? And I think that I'm curious to see if she reaches that Hall of Fame trajectory or if that interferes with it. And I think this fight was the first fight since the Michaela Mayer fight for me where I saw glimpses of that Hall of Fame potential boxer. So this was a very promising performance.
That's really a good comment. And so much in our current society, the extra noise that you hear can have an impact and can affect your approach um, to what you do. That's for sure. You have an article on boxing scene right now in which you talk about, and it's really instructive because you're a lot of times we don't hear about the fighters very early in their career, names that we can kind of file away uh, and think about. You wrote a story that's on Boxing Scene right now that I urge people to go look at about prospects. And you mentioned a couple of prospects. One, you mentioned Ben Johnson, who's undefeated welterweight, trained by Lamont Roach Sr. What put him on your list?
Well, first off, I'd like to preface that like I'm a big fan of lists in boxing. Like growing up, Burt Sugar and lists, and that was like a huge thing for
Okay.
me. I like the sports centric side of boxing and not the business
Yeah.
centric.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's really fun for me to highlight young fighters because that used to be like my passion when I was young. Who's the next great one? So Ben Johnson, Lamont Roach Sr. just had his birthday. Ben Johnson's an absolutely phenomenal pro fighter, but what stands out to me and what I'll share here is as an amateur, he won amateur tournaments as the younger person. So say you're in like a 16 and 17 bracket. A lot of times as a 16-year-old as an amateur, you lose because you're fighting a lot of 17-year-olds. He'd actually win brackets as the younger fighter. And it felt as though, I'm not sure this is true, per se, a lot of times at big national tournaments, people were moving up in weight to not fight Benjamin Johnson. So he came into the pros with a lot of momentum. He has a style that, we lazily compare guys to big fighters, but he kind of reminds me of a David Benavidez-esque fighter, a good aggressive fighter, all knockout wins. He's very early in his career, but this is an exciting up and comer who's really at every level achieved pretty high things.
That's great. And you hit on several women also in your list, like uh, Stephanie Simon, who you list here as she's a junior welterweight who's undefeated. Tell me a little bit about her.
Well, she's kind of like, and I always lazily compare fighters to people I really like, so I just set them up to fail, right? Because I'm going to compare her to a mauling style of a great fighter, and then the fan goes, "Well, she's nothing like him," and it's like it's more so I'm just kind
Yeah,
of throwing a
exactly.
general thing. But she's like this
Yeah,
great pressure fighter. Now, a lot of these young ones on late on the list are great amateurs. I remember, and with Stephanie Simon, she first off, she trains with a great coach, John Pullman. He's one of my favorite coaches in all of boxing.
yeah,
He's just a
yeah.
great man, and I can't say enough good things about him. So that's all. It's always promising when you're with someone like that. And then on top of that, in the amateur, she was stopping a lot of high level women in national tournaments and winning. And she didn't quite make the Olympics, but she had this very promising, overwhelming fighters with pressure and getting a lot of stoppages. She's probably the most physically fit women's boxer, I would say, in the world. She can do 20
Wow,
pull
that's
ups.
quite a statement.
Yeah, I really think she is. Like, she can do 20 pull ups. And I mean, I think just John's going to help her with the training component, but I think there's just
Yeah,
a physical strength component to her that's going to make her an
interesting.
elite fighter.
Very good. Well, that's that exactly. Statements like that and explaining all that, and for people, I want to urge people to read this story because there are several others that you list in there. It gives you, back way back a million years ago when I was doing the ESPN Top Rank Boxing shows, the weekly ones. I Hundreds and hundreds of people come up to me and say, "Hey, I saw that guy way back when he was a 4, 6 rounder on one of those early Top Rank shows, and that showed me he could be something good." And of course, then he would become a champion or something. So stories like this help fans kind of grasp who could be a future star. So go to boxingscene.com and read that story by Lucas. You were speaking of women's boxing on January 3rd. Amanda Serrano goes back down to her original weight. I think she's going back down to featherweight. Where she was going to take on Erica Cruz in a rematch, but because of a blurry, uh, not totally consequential, but potentially consequential blood test for PEDs. Erica Cruz is out of the fight, and Reina Tellez comes in. How do you see that January 3rd fight? And can Tellez, the San Antonio fighter, can she give Amanda Serrano a good go?
Well, top rated amateur, right? And I think there is a chance to me, and this might be not the greatest insight, but to me, Serrano's since the second Katie Taylor fight, there's been a level of she doesn't want to get headbutted, and there's a level of she is not as aggressive coming forward. And she's been in a lot of hard fights, and she's getting up there, and she's been in these stages. So I think every fight from this point on is a hard fight for Amanda Serrano because
I
she's
agree.
reaching that point in her career of diminished returns. And I think that the one thing I noticed in that last Katie Taylor fight was she's not as aggressive on the front foot. She's not coming forward and I think part of that might be my uh armchair quarterback boxing coach observing is maybe that head clash has her not wanting to engage in that way. So I think any opponent that's a world class decorated fighter could give her a challenge. I think the Erica Cruz fight for me I thought was going to be a rough one because I felt like it was going to inevitably create a head clash. I think the hardest fights for her are going to be the ones that in which she gets a cut again and she relives that second Katie Taylor fight.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we'll see if Tellez can give her a battle. And on that card, another absolutely fascinating fight. Stephanie Hahn defending her title against a woman who, at age 43, former icon in women's boxing who went over to mixed martial arts and won world championships, returned to boxing about a year and a half ago, and has now worked her way in to challenge for a world title, and that's Holly Holm. To me, that fight is a fascinating fight for no other reason, just because here's Holly Holm at age 43, still showing she's viable as a boxer.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about this fight the same way as you. It's an incredible story when someone's in their 40s competing as a world class boxer, no matter really what gender. And Holly Holmes achieved a lot. She's a legend because of the Ronda Rousey fight, but she was a legend as a pioneer in boxing before that. And now it's potentially she could become a 40-year-old champion, which is very uncommon in boxing. So, and if you also look, I believe Stephanie Hahn was dropped in her last fight. She's a solid fighter, but she hasn't really like blown me away as
Right.
a dominant champion. So I think that what makes it interesting is there's that lingering thought of can Holly Holm, the great boxer, can she have one more great night?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Very well put, because the greats sometimes can summon that ability for one great night, whether it's Roberto Duran beating Iran Barkley or Holly Holm, beating Stephanie Hahn, and certainly that's a possibility. So yeah, that'll be fun. It's January 3rd, and that's a fight that I think we're all interested in seeing. Let me also mention to you coming up. The possibility of a if they both win their fights, Naoya Inoue and Junto Nakatani getting together, the likelihood, in fact, Japanese boxing is on an incredible roll. I mean, for anyone that's a boxing fan, if they just pay attention in any way, shape, or form, they will know that there are so many good fighters coming out of Japan, and these two are the poster kids for that. Is that going to? Do you think that fight? Number one, I think it's going to be a great, great fight. Will boxing fans, even in America, where the boxing fans tend to be a little jingoistic about what they pay attention to, will those fans understand the greatness of that fight?
At this point, I'm just gonna say I don't care. I'm gonna be
Yeah,
selfish
right. Why? Why do we
because
care,
it's
right?
one of these things where it's I think there's a issue, like you said, American fans like American fighters per se, British fighters. And there's always a sizeism issue, right? A certain weight class.
Yeah,
Oh, you
right,
get kind
right,
of the
right.
jock guy. If I put him in a headlock, what would this guy do to me? And they don't understand in a way is a very treacherous guy. But the one caveat I will say is it does feel like we're tempting the boxing gods here. It always feels weird when we're
Yeah.
one fight away. I never
Yep.
love to
Yep.
talk about it because it feels like when you double book a fight, weird things can happen. So the only thing I'll say is I really hope we get it because it like I wouldn't say it's a passing of the torch moment, but Inoue's had this great career. Nakatani's the younger fighter who's following in his footsteps. He really looks sensational. Typically, the younger guy wins that fight. But Inoue's so special, we go, but could Inoue win it, right? So it's one of those great matchups that all of us would love. And hopefully, our deep passion could inspire people to realize how good of a fight it is. And if they don't, whatever. That said, I'm really scared to tempt the boxing gods
Yeah,
because it just
exactly.
feels like, bad things happen.
No, that's true. Well, I'll tell you what, beyond everything else in this day and age, where oftentimes we don't get all the fights that we want. Props to both these men for wanting to make this fight in a way, especially because he doesn't have to. It's not mandatory for him to accept that challenge, and he's already created a Hall of Fame career. So that'll be something. Before I let you go, uh, a question more journalistically based. I mentioned at the beginning, and I like to always ask about this with the different people that come on and cover the sport. Uh, we're in an age now where boxing is covered almost exclusively, digitally, like many things are. And the top boxing websites like Boxing Scene, which you work for, do a good job of chronicling the sport. And one of the great things about it is it's not like a newspaper where there's only so much space for boxing or whatever, or even a TV show where if it's not all about boxing, you only get a segment. There's all kinds of space, and you can find out as much as you want and get as many insights and as many, thoughts as you'd like and information. Covering boxing in this digital age is a challenge because there are the real journalists like yourself and many others writing and reporting in a responsible way. And then there are other people not. Uh, how, how do you see that dynamic in the way the sport is covered now?
So
I
I'm
know
gonna
it's a
like
heavy
men.
question,
Well,
but
no, actually was thinking about this morning when I was working out. And it's funny you bring this up because so I tend to try to be fueled off of positive and love rather than negative and down. So the way I try to frame this argument is I try to treat the sport with as much care and compassion and love that I have for it, and try to find interesting things that genuinely I'm passionate about, or stories amongst people that really bring my inner passion out of the sport. And yes, there's always going to be people doing weird stuff that I'm not a fan of, but the more I do this and the more I get recognition, I guess, for what I'll say, the recognition for my passion for the sport and finding the things that I think are intriguing and highlighting them. I try not to look at it because I think that by giving that energy really weighs me down. So I just try to produce as good a work and try to treat the sport with the dignity and honor and respect that I think it should be shown. And I think that if I maximize my potential and I do the best job that I can, and I listen to guys like Jason Langendorf, Trish Dixon, Matt Christie, these guys have my back, it really helps me just get the most for it. And it's not about the praise, it's about giving this, and it's going to sound hokey, but it's really what I really feel is it's about giving the fighters the best opportunity to have the best stories told, to create the most interesting fight weeks for the broadcasters to tell great stories. So the fighters maximize everything about their career, and it becomes a great times capsule for those that preserve that moment in history. So, though I know there are people that are just kind of doing stuff and reactionary, I really have gotten to a point where I'm just trying to focus on what I can do the best.
yeah, very well put. And let me explain to everyone, although I would think they would know this at this point, I'm not suggesting that uh, anything should come at when I say some not running responsible. Of course, any journalistic efforts that may be about a negative story or something that needs to be reporting, that's not in the category that I was suggesting. I'm not suggesting everything has to be flower and roses, but it should be handled responsibly. And when it's handled responsibly with journalistic integrity, that's all you want. And the kind of stories you're talking about, which is what you kind of specialize in, is a very needed and important aspect of journalism that sometimes people ignore or don't appreciate as much as they should. But I certainly do. You are the author of the book Inside the Ropes of Boxing, Boxer's Guide to the Sport. People can get that on Amazon, I assume, right?
Yep, they can get it there. And all that is basically, I met so many, kind of like, but this is actually a great segue to what we were talking about. So the reason I write stories about this, the interesting stories, is I'd go to boxing gyms and I'd meet people and I'd hear all these interesting stories and I'd share them kind of like with people in the boxing industry, and they'd go, "That's interesting." And I just started writing down the fascinating tidbits about the fighter rather than going, this person's going to become a world champion one day. And in
Mm-hmm.
that quest of being in the gyms, a lot of people didn't understand basic concepts about even turning pro or what's required to be an amateur. And all
Good
the book
point.
is just a handbook, a very rudimentary handbook about what the process of a pro career is or an amateur career and things to look out for. um just it's kind of like every chapter ends with questions, so it's more to make someone think about decisions, because it's a very heavy career path and you could probably make a lot more money doing a lot other things. So you have to really know what you're signing up for and really be committed and have a deep love for it. So that book was more so kind of just aimed for the fighters to
Yeah,
hopefully
that's
be an
interesting.
educational tool.
Yeah, very interesting, and a worthwhile endeavor to be sure. Lucas, I appreciate you jumping on. We'll have to get you back on again before some of the big fights and get your insights on things. And I want to remind people they can read your articles on Boxing Scene, an excellent boxing site that provides all kinds of stories about the sport. And I'm so glad you joined us.
Well, it was an honor once again, and I love talking boxing and just all the iconic calls and the way you set. I even study the way you set things up on the calls, and it's just really cool to be able to talk boxing with you because you've created such a deep impact on my boxing watching.
I appreciate that very, very much. And I've always liked to think that what I have done on boxing broadcasts. I mean, I came from the background of being a newspaper man, so it was about telling a story, and so I like to hope that that's the case, and that's a good validation of what you're saying. So I appreciate it very much. You take care, and we will talk to you again down the road. So that is Lucas Kettelle, who is a fine writer on Boxing Scene. We're glad that you joined us for this episode of our Big Time Boxing Show, and we will be back again in the near future with more of the personalities in the sport of boxing. Take care, everybody.